Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or to those who are joining us on Post View. Hello, thanks for tuning in. This evening we are talking a bit about the Sony FX3. I'm your host. My name is Sean Elwood, and I'm going to be joined tonight by a panel of experts, industry veterans, beginning with I've got Jason Wingrove, Pete DeVries, and Andy Hardy. I'll introduce them in just a moment on stream. But in the meantime, I just want to quickly run through what we'll be talking about this evening. So we're going to start off with a bit of a run through of just the key specs of the camera. Of course, a lot of that stuff's already out there, but I think it's a great place to start the conversation. And then we're going to go around the table, talk to each of the gents who have joined us this evening, who've had some hands-on time with the camera, hear a bit about their experiences, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions and you're tuning in now, make sure you type those in, and we'll get to them when we get a chance. Now, I'm going to pull on my first guest here. So, welcome to the stream. Jason, how are you going?
Good, excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So, Jason's a Sydney-based director. He's a cinematographer as well. He's been widely awarded for his work across drama, documentary, comedy, and TVCs, garnering Clio Access MADC and ATV awards, among many others. Illustrious career there.
Those were the days.
And I'm also happy to welcome to the stream Peter DeVries, ACS. How you going, Peter?
Very well. Thanks, Sean. Nice to be here.
Brilliant.
And Jason, hi.
Pete?
Peter is an accredited member of the Australian Cinematographer Society. His films have won numerous awards, including Emmys and BAFTAs. He's contributed to programs hosted by David Attenborough and has worked with director James Cameron filming the wreck of the Titanic for IMAX 3D. Sounds like a great gig.
That was just before lunch.
Very good. And I'm also joined on stream by Andrew Hardy. How you doing, mate?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good, good. So Andy's a filmmaker currently living in Byron Bay, runs a commercial production company named Emble Studio that shoot work locally and abroad. And Andrew's worked with a range of top brands, including Mini Cooper, Scott Sport, Zomato, and a lot of tourism work as well. So Andy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Nice to meet you guys as well. Thanks, Jason and Peter.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
I guess probably anyone tuning in will notice, we've got a bit of a range here of people working in sort of different areas of the industry, and I think that's what we hope to get this evening is a bit of a sense from people who have different perspectives on the camera, how it strikes each of them. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We're going to jump into the sort of technical side of things here, have a bit of a look at the camera itself. So, gentlemen, I'll pop you off just while we run through that. We'll come back in just a moment, and I'll throw up my little presentation here. So, talking here about the latest addition to the Cinema Line, the FX3. This is now launching in Australia. It's going to be available around mid-March for 6,699 Australian dollars. That puts it, about $700 above the Alpha 7S Mark III, which is obviously a camera that a lot of comparisons are going to be drawn to. Now, you can see a lot of similarities between the 7S and the FX3. I think, looking at that very top line, you can see, the core is the same, right? You've got a same sensor, essentially, similar processing. And so the picture you're going to get out of either one of them is going to look similar, feel similar. And the recording modes that you get are very similar between those two cameras as well. So you've got 4K at up to 120 frames per second. You've got Full HD 240. You've got every mode is available in all intra. You've got the availability of XAVC HS if you want that H.265 encoding. You've also got 10-bit 422. So you've got really good quality options across the full range of codecs. Just like the A7S Mark III, you've got a huge ISO range. same dynamic range you can expect there. And as of originally, when we announced, S-Cinetone was exclusive to the FX3 between these two, but the new firmware, of course, now just announced for the Alpha 7S Mark III, which gives it S-Cinetone as well. So that's now shared. So the guts, the actual image that comes out of the camera, basically identical between the two. You do also have a lot of the mobility options from the S Mark III. So you've got the stabilization and the autofocus, all that sort of stuff. Where you see the difference is, the body of the camera, having the handle and the grip, having the 1/4-inch threads, the tally lamps, all that stuff built onto the body, and also the difference in design as well as the internal fan. So no doubt we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. The concept with the FX3 is to have a really cinema-focused camera in terms of ergonomics, but to have it compact and really designed for one-man operation. So that's what a lot of those differences in the design are all about. You can see the way that a lot of the controls have been moved onto the top of the body, which means that if you're running the camera, slung low, or if you're holding it, in more of a cradle position, you still have really easy access to all of your controls. You can do exactly what you need to do. Of course, the inclusion of the XLR kit in the box as well is really focusing it in on that video purpose. I think in terms of big hardware changes, that extra cooling is something that you definitely notice when you look at the body. You've got that active cooling. You've got the fan and the cooling cavity there. That means that you can record 4K 60p really essentially uninterrupted. You could record concerts, no problem. It'll just run and run and run. Even in the 4K 120p, you've got a much longer run time, so it gives you a lot of flexibility in the way that you shoot. Dust and moisture sealing, pretty much all these elements are very similar to what you get with the S Mark III. Nice to know that even with that active cooling, you still get really, really good dust and moisture resistance. Of course, the addition of the 1/4-inch threads means that you can kit this up in a much more compact way. And of course, as I mentioned before, a lot of those frequently used keys have been moved up onto the top of the body. Now, we've got, of course, a lot of things that are carried over from the S Mark III here, the touch menu as well as the touch interface for focus, which is really great when you're a one-man operator, having the ability to work through the touch screen, place focus exactly where you want it, use that tracking capability through the touch screen, very, very flexible. And that vari-angle monitor, which was really well received on the S Mark III, also here as well. Having the zoom operation on the body is lovely as well. We've talked a little bit about this, but we also have that active stabilization from the S Mark III. That means that you can often get away with hand holding in situations where previously you would have to use a gimbal. Maybe we'll chat a little bit more about that with Andy. I know he's had a chance to try that out. And of course, we've still got that E-mount capability, which means stacks of native lenses. So that's that one. I'm just going to close my little window here and, oops, press the wrong button. I'm going to invite everyone back onto the stream. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
We're back.
So,
Hi.
thank you, thank you. So maybe I think I might start with Peter. Have you've marshaled your thoughts a little bit about the FX3?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing that struck me when I took it out of the box, I really didn't know what to expect, because the number 3, FX3, I'd spent some time with the FX6, FX9, and all the other new branded Cine Line cameras. So I was thinking, FX3, so what is that? Where does that sit? But I guess the clue was the fact that it did have a Cine Line moniker on it. So that sort of meant that it was going to be somewhere within that structure, that line. So the first thing I noticed, of course, was the finish on the camera. This is before I even turned it on. I just picked it up and looked at it. Now, the thing is, it's a very solid camera and built and finished in the same style, the same sort of finish that the FS6 has, and FX9, and that was sort of very, very encouraging because it has a very solid, very, very solid feel about it. And of course, my initial thoughts were just looking at it and thinking, well, where does this sit? What can I do with this camera that I can't do with other cameras? And it soon became very apparent that it was in fact a S3 A7S Mark III inside, and what Sony had done is basically built this amazing body around it to basically based on feedback from everybody who said, look, we love the S3, everyone loves it, but it needed more. It's a stills camera that does amazing video, but it's still a stills camera. So this sort of, I soon realized that it actually went way beyond the stills camera hybrid. It was not a hybrid anymore, even though in fact it is a hybrid. But to me, they put all their eggs into the video basket, which made a hell of a difference to the way you feel.
Pictures of the camera when you're talking about the body. So go on.
Yeah, it's just the structure is very, very impressive. The way that it's beautifully put together. But I was still sort of a bit curious about why I should be shooting on this and not a A7S Mark III. So it became very apparent that all the controls, as you mentioned in your introduction, the controls have been relocated to the top, to the bottom, the dedicated zebra peaking to replace the jog wheel on the back or the selector on the back, the four-way selector on the back, has now been completely revamped to actually have the settings that cinematographers want to go to straight away. They don't want to go into the function menus. They don't want to have to set all that up. They want to have C1, C2. They want to have a button, I know I do, that says zebra, a button that says peaking, ISO. So in that regard, it's very, very beautifully appointed for the cinematographer, because everything that you'd expect to be where it is there, but in this interesting form factor. So I won't go on too much more because I do have other things I'd like to say about it, but my initial impression was a big surprise. I just thought, wow, what is this camera for? And it became very apparent after a few days where it sat for me. And I actually love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But I'd be very interested to hear what the other guys think about it as well. So I might just hand over to them.
Yeah, great. Jason, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, look, I think you're right there, Pete. I think for me it was a bit of a slow burn trying to work out where this sort of sat and what it meant to me. I think, so I've been an FS7 shooter for a long time, 5, 6, whatever, since it came out. My A camera is the baby FX6. I've dragged that up the hills, kicking and screaming into major productions. And my B cam and rig and all that sort of stuff is this A7S III. So I didn't really need to go out and visually test the camera because I knew what it was going to look like. But I think having used this one as my sort of B camera, little rig camera, second camera, I don't sort of do long form interviews and things, but I will definitely put it on a gimbal here or there, or put it in a different angle, get an extra little bonus little shot. Definitely there is, as there has always been with shooting DSLRs, even from the Canon 5D days, 5D days, there's always been sort of compromises with using SLRs, a stills camera that's 100% stills and 10% video for shooting on production. So what they've done with the FX3, and it's taken me a little while to work this out, and they basically just distilled down all the stuff from the A7S Mark III into the stuff that you really need and turned it into a proper little production little beast. All of the buttons that you don't need are gone. All of the stuff that's dedicated to stills is removed. It's all the stuff that you need for proper production is right there. I don't need a tally at the front for talent, because I'd never want anybody to know when I'm rolling. But the tallies at the back, you cannot. The number of times I have not rolled on the most brilliant shots, time and time again. I've got, oh, that's fantastic. It's brilliant. Oh, I'm not rolling. Nice big, you hit that record button, it lights up red. There's another red bar at the thing, all the red around the monitor. It's, you know, those little things, proper dedicated, big, multiple dedicated record buttons that you cannot, in the heat of the moment, mix up with anything else. The fan, the active cooling. I mean, you probably won't get into trouble too much with the A7S Mark III in an interview, but I think about being production, about being professional, and not getting yourself in a spot is making sure you are covered. You know, there's going to be no cutout, no, you're not going to have any sort of timeouts for heat. All the tallies and record buttons, and it's very simple, dedicated, distilled down little nugget.
I'll just, before we jump over to talk to Andy, I think we've got a few questions in the chat, so I might just throw them up and we can tackle one or two of them. Oh, great. So the question is, does anyone know if the new FX3 top handle attaches to the hot shoe on the FX6 camera? Does it allow access to audio channels 3 and 4 via the XLR inputs? So
there's no hot shoe on the FX6, is there? I don't think there's
not like that. So no, it's not. Not FX6 compatible. I'll super double check that, but I'm pretty.
I think perhaps you mean the socket on the bottom, on the top of the body once you take the handle off, and that's definitely a dedicated. This is never remember what it's the MI shoe or whatever. It's the multi-interface shoe. Yes, unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, the top handle is not a solution to the handle off, and it would just be replacing one handle with another handle. Unfortunately,
to answer the second question, your audio channels 3 and 4 are stereo for the 3.5 mil input on the handle. So, channels 1 and 2 belong to the XLR/TRS. Because it's a hybrid socket, but channels 3 and 4 are just for the 3.5 mil. Tom Crawford asks, will it have the same custom button assignments as the S Mark III, or are there more video-focused additions? I haven't seen any documentation that suggests there'll be different assignments on the FX3, but we might just quickly, I'll throw out to the Brains Trust on our side, and we'll just get some confirmation. All right.
Yeah, sorry. Did you? Can I just make a comment about the dedicated buttons?
Please do.
Is that what did you want to discuss that briefly, or did you want to pass on that?
Oh no. Well, I think this is about custom buttons and what's assignable on the camera. But if you had a thought on the buttons.
Well, just very, very simply that the buttons have got firmly etched names written against them, white balance, ISO, everything is there. And it's there for a reason, because they are the things that you would not want to change. So you could change them, but it could get very confusing because you'd be looking at the wrong wording. They are assigned because they are vital to cinematography to be able to make changes very, very quickly.
I mean, I think one of the things we've always tried to do with the Sony cameras is make them customizable, and you do know people have special uses for doing things one way or another, but definitely I think the point's taken. It is good to at least have a strong baseline for that stuff, and especially on a set where multiple people might be using it, it's good to have a common understanding of what a button does when you push it. Andy, did you want to jump in with some of your impressions from using the camera?
Yeah, I mean, the whole time that you guys were sort of talking, I mean, I think when you sort of first started off before, it was like, who is this camera for? I honestly feel like you kind of made it for me. You know, it's kind of a bit of a, it feels a bit of a, and I don't know actually if I'm still meant to have this or not, but I honestly feel like
You've got it.
this thing is like kind of the camera that I've been looking for, you know?
Yeah.
It's honestly the size, the shape, everything about it just feels like I think that's the biggest thing. I think I've seen a lot of people talking about it online and stuff and saying like it's no different than the A7S III, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is, like you guys mentioned before, Peter and Jason, it's the shape of the body. It's made for cinematographers. It's made for one-man bands that are like out there creating films by themselves, which is a lot of what I've done before. But yeah, I don't know. I think like it's pretty exciting, like how, you know, the camera's kind of shifting into this place where normally you have to have a camera cage and a whole rig set up where, like, you know, other cinema cameras that we have, you know, you end up rigging them out with monitors and like you need all these 1/4-inch holes in it to like actually rig all the stuff that you want to it. Whereas this comes with that like built into the body. Those holes are already there. And the layout of all the buttons are just made for you know, for video shooters. I think I've shot a lot of stuff. Like I come from shooting on like A7S II and then A7 III and you know, I was sort of waiting for so long for the A7S III to come out. And then when it did, I never really, like, you know, I got to test it and try it out and stuff like that, but I never really fell in love with it like I have with this camera, because I think that, you know, just the way that it's kind of shaped for that single person shooter, you know, your dedicated record button down here, I found I use that honestly just as much as the top. And I was like, that's pretty fun. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that it's a really interesting camera to like, you know, to use, to work with. And I actually sort of shot quite a lot. I put out a little 25-minute kind of like YouTube video the night that the camera released on kind of my last week's experience with it. And I also made like a little short film, which we've got kind of queued up, I think, to play. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. All I can say is just that the shape is the biggest difference for me. Is like, even though it might internally be very similar to the S3, that the shape makes a very big difference, because, you know, while the picture might be the same, I think that the usability of the camera, when I'm actually hands-on holding it, that's what makes the biggest difference. It's my experience on the shoot. And if it makes that process easier, then that's way better. Like I'm all about that. So
I think that was one of the things that Jason was saying before we came on air was, you know, just that in the cut and thrust of actually using a camera, you know, day in, day out as a professional tool, you know, people can, you can say that, you know, they've just changed the body and the camera on the inside's the same, but the body of the camera is what you got your hands on for 8 hours a day. You know, it's critical. It's not just a detail.
Yeah, I think given the A7S and the FX3 in your hand, shooting 2 days separately with it, you definitely, it's a no-brainer. If you're doing dedicated production, that just, yeah, FX3 is, you know, it's one of those things. It's one of those things you just probably have to just, you know, it's like I said, it's a bit of a slow burn. You have to sort of get your hands onto it and realize, you know, once you've worked with something dedicated in the field, in you know, in a pressure situation, or with time of rush, or in the dark, or whatever it is, you know, having something that's much it's distilled down into exactly what you need, and everything's right there where it needs to be, rather than diving and finding out which one of the many necessary in a DSLR buttons are there.
Yeah, Jason, I actually want to weigh in on that. I think like what you're saying, it's like when, you know, when you're in that run and gun environment, it's like, you know, I think I come from like, I feel like I'm almost coming from an opposite end of the scale in terms of like the sort of filmmaking that you guys have been doing. I've sort of been working my way up using mirrorless cameras and like DSLRs as if they are like cinema cameras, you know? And so then coming into this like amazing middle ground where like it's the size and compact portability where you can throw it in your backpack, but then have this insane camera that packs such a punch. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's just really filling a pretty awesome gap there for solo shooters and people who, you know, have been using mirrorless cameras as if they are straight up cinema cameras, you know?
Yeah.
Can I just jump in there short for a sec?
Please do.
Yeah, so, yeah, I certainly, Andrew, I agree with that. And Jason, I also 100% behind you there. I think what's interesting about the launch of this camera is that it is basically the A7S Mark III, a camera that took last year became the camera of the video camera of the year, well, voted by so many people. It's a camera people fell in love with and thought this is the biggest boost that we've ever had. Autofocus, high ISO, everything was just almost perfect. People went nuts. So you've now got this camera, which is basically, and I don't know whether you fully agree, Sean, but it's basically the same camera. I think you've said as such. It's basically the same camera inside. So that's why there's so much emphasis in reviews and the talk around town about the shape, the ergonomics, because they know even if you couldn't do anything with it, hand hold it, they know it's a really good camera, a camera that's proven itself, and one that is very, very popular. So there's a lot of emphasis on the ergonomics of it, the viewfinder or the lack of viewfinder, the ND filters, the screen at the back. These are the kind of things that people are actually focusing on because there's nothing else to discuss.
Right. It's kind of settled.
I don't ever remember in many, many years actually ever using a viewfinder to shoot video properly. I always use the rear screen and or an external monitor and or I'm wirelessing to other monitors or a monitor on the top. Yeah, I mean, I at the first thought you think, oh, hang on, it's got no, where did the LCD, the EVF go? But to be honest, when I'm working with video, when I'm working as a production as a rig camera, the EVF just gets in the way. Every time you go to touch the camera, it switches from EVF to, it's just a little bit sort of kind of bugs me. So I mean, I don't ever, I'm sure there's plenty of people who, use it like that. But I think if you're really if you're on the move or if you're doing something around and gun, you literally can't do it like, it's easier if it's on your shoulder, but somehow just walk something up like that is a little bit harder to use. So yeah, everyone has their own opinion, but for me, the EVF is something I don't think I've ever used in a video situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think for video, peripheral awareness is so much more important as well, right? You need to know where your shot's going, where people are coming in, people are going out. Working off a viewfinder doesn't really work for that as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, Andy, you shot this amazing short clip with the camera, and you were kind enough to provide it beforehand. So I'm just going to throw it up now, and we can have a quick watch and maybe discuss some of your experience shooting it.
Totally. Maybe a heads up for the viewers just to maybe turn down just a slight smidgen. I think when the export was compressed, it might be a little bit high on the audio, but it should be good.
Brace yourselves.
My name is Akira Yamada, semi-professional downhill mountain bike rider. The biggest challenge with racing definitely comes down to your mindset. Mental preparation is just massive in racing, just because you're always on the limit. You just have to be so focused, make no mistakes. These days, milliseconds is what races are won and lost by, so it's super important. The drive to keep racing is definitely just a fire burning inside of me. It's just a competitive edge that I've always had, always got. Don't see myself losing it anytime soon, and it's just so fun. Can't beat it really.
Lovely.
Yeah, very nice. Awesome. Well done. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
So AF there happening, or are you doing your own focus there, or set and forget, or some AF happening there? Or
so It was a combination. So like I actually have a little secret source lens, which isn't actually here. It's that's one other thing that I've loved about using Sony for the last, like, I don't know, 7 years or so now, is like the versatility of being able to adapt lenses on. So I did use a little bit of manual focus for some of the shots where they were more setup shots, like not as much riding and stuff like that. Like say that when we were getting on the bike, details of the bike, a lot of that stuff's on a manual focus 50mm. But then, majority of the other shots are between an 85mm and the 20mm 1.8. And like, I'd say, 50% of the time using like sort of the AF continuous and just moving that kind of zone focusing to where I knew the rider was going to be. And then actually the shot where he kind of was riding past quite fast, I got him to stay still at the top and tap on his face, and it tracked him the whole way, both that shot and then switching into the 85 shot after. And like, this kid's pretty fast. Like, this guy's like a junior downhill state champion. So he's not going slow down there, even though it's in 240 frames a second in some of the shots and 100 in others. Yeah, he's going fast. So I was pretty blown away by that. Like, being able to tap to focus on someone riding a bike. And there was even a handful of times where he was already riding and I tapped on him and it tracked him.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, obviously, if you're a solo shooter and you're putting it on a gimbal, it's great to have AF that you can rely on. If you don't have, anyone chasing focus for you, and you want to free, just have one hand. You can't go grabbing the lens all the time.
Yeah.
And you really liked the there are a couple of shots there, especially one where you're up on the hill and you're kind of moving past him as he's riding through.
Oh yeah.
And you said, so that particular shot was on a gimbal, yeah?
Yeah, totally. So I was sort of emulating a shot that I have in mind. We're actually about to undertake some pretty cool project with specialized bikes. So I have a few ideas for some shots that we've been wanting to achieve sort of in the forest and stuff like that. So definitely some stuff we're going to be probably attempting with a cable cam. But yeah, that one itself, like we were out there just with like the camera, a couple of lenses. I had my friend Ollie shooting some behind the scenes for me. And basically just had that on the gimbal and just pretty much running with the gimbal as he's riding past me to get that kind of like parallax effect. But yeah, pretty amazing, like just to be able to track focus on, like it really locked onto him when I was running, even with like trees and stuff going in between the camera and the rider. Like that was one thing that blew me away as well, was like how often, obstructions would come between us and it would lock back onto the person as well. Like, so yeah, that was
definitely something they've worked really hard on, I think, is that ability to lose and then reacquire focus.
Yeah. I couldn't do that manually. No way.
That's a great lens, that 1.8 20mm. Beautiful, isn't it? Amazing lens. Love it. Absolutely love it.
It is by far.
Andy, post-wise, do you shoot on like Cinetone, or are you shooting on just log and then grading later, or what?
Yeah, so basically in my little kind of like review thing, which I stayed up until 5 a.m. editing the other day, trying to ride the train of camera.
We'll link it in the description for you, mate.
So anyway, I was like editing away, and I shot a variety of stuff. So I shot S Cinetone was the first thing I tried out on the camera, and I was like pleasantly surprised by that. Like having not really used S Cinetone much before, coming from like like I said, kind of the descents of this camera, like the A7 III, the S2. Using the S3, hadn't really played with S Cinetone very much before, but like even just pulling that into edit, you're just like, it looks good straight away. You're like, I could ship this almost, But then also, if you need to grade it, you've still got such an incredible amount of range with the 10-bit. So, but the specific the film with Akira Yamada was actually like all S-Log2 because. I probably should have shot S-Log3, but I opted for S-Log2 because I knew that I was like, okay, we're shooting this. I have 1 day to turn this around and then out. And so the more sort of time I could shave off, and in that moment, it was kind of like the option to shoot S-Log2 and spend a little bit less time in the grade. So,
why didn't you shoot with the Cine?
With the S Cinetone.
Given that you had a quick turnaround.
I guess because I was thinking I was going to put a more stylized grade on it than before, and I sort of had played around with that S-Cinetone, and although now looking back, because basically I'd just been shooting flat out for a week, and so I shot the first thing that I shot. Like I said, I shot S-Cinetone on that first kind of like. If anyone goes to watch the little video over on my YouTube, there's kind of like the first sort of section of footage. We shot some stuff on the beach. And me and my partner Jess, and the footage turned out really nice. And I just kind of like looked at it and stuff, but I didn't dive fully into the grade. And so I was imagining that shooting S-Log2 or S-Log3 would still give me a little bit more range, but I could definitely be wrong in that. But yeah, so I just opted to shoot S-Log2 on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. By the way, just for the record, yeah, log will always give you more than Cinetone.
Yeah, but then I think like shooting S-Log3, it's just so much flatter, and that's definitely something that I'd probably work towards, is like probably developing my own sort of conversion luck to get close to what I want to achieve if I'm working on a job that has a really quick turnaround. But but yeah, like on this one, it was just kind of like use S-Log2. I've got a pretty good Rec 709 LUT, and then I have sort of some LUTs that I've used throughout my commercial work, and sort of a little LUT pack that I've created. Just kind of used a combination of my Rec 709 LUT and then another kind of stylized one that I use often. So, yeah.
Well, look, guys, I think we could probably talk shop here for a lot longer, but it's been really good to get some different takes and perspectives on the camera. Thank you so much for jumping on and joining me this evening. Is there any sort of last thoughts anyone wanted to share before we wrap things up?
I think
I don't know.
A couple of things I wanted to just address, given the kind of feedback that I'm already getting and reading a little bit about. I just wanted to kind of put them in a bit of perspective after having a hands-on experience, not quite as immersive as Andy's, but still a hands-on experience. First of all, the lack of the viewfinder is something that comes up a lot. But having said that, some of the best, I'm sort of in Jason's camp here, some of the best, most dynamic shots that I use are shot at this height. Moving the camera, relying on autofocus, reliable autofocus to get me through without having to put the camera up to my eye. On the other hand, that puts me at this height. There are times when I like to have the camera up higher and sitting on my shoulder and looking through a viewfinder. It's a different perspective. I think there's something to be said for it. However, I think that there's a whole generation of people now who are not used to having viewfinders. They are electronic viewfinders. They're very, very happy, very confident, and they will use the LCD panel at the back and until sunset and beyond. So I think that it sort of what it's done is it's actually encouraged me to do more dynamic and risky things. So I'm kind of over that. The ND filter thing is something that comes up. Why can't we have ND filters? It doesn't seem a big ask these days. It was the body size, the body form meant that you either get your 5-axis stabilization, which is absolutely amazing. I love the stabilization, and I would very happy to go without the NDs just to have that stabilization.
I don't understand.
If you,
It's okay. We understand.
Siri doesn't understand. Yeah, that's my love story. Anyway, I'd much rather have the stabilization. With a camera so small and so light, you do need great stabilization. You haven't got the weight. So I think it's a good, I don't want to call it a trade-off. It's just that I think that having a in-camera stabilization is an incredible asset for that small package. And really, I mean, the only other thing that I was really impressed with was, and Andy touched on this, literally touched on it, and that's the touchscreen tracking, which is just touch it and just let it weave its magic. And that's amazing. I love the dedicated, I said this earlier, dedicated buttons for peaking. It makes me feel like I'm using a proper video camera. But look,
Shouldn't
basically
it?
that's
It's
it.
in the wrong time.
There is one other thing. Wait, there's one more. I do like the way you can lock the settings by holding down the button. Say you want to lock the ISO to 400, 500. Hold the button down; it will lock it. That's one thing now. You don't have to worry about it now. You can put that aside. You've got that locked in. You can lock in your shutter speed. The number of times that I've changed settings and shot for another 4 hours at a 60th of a second or 120th of a second by mistake. It happens all the time. I like to be able to lock those things away and just concentrate on aperture and focus, which are the two things that I'm shot by shot basis. That's all.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. No, thanks, Peter. Those are actually some really great points. So thank you for bringing those up. Well, guys, look, once again, thank you so much for joining. Yes, FX3 available in mid-March, 6699 AU dollars or 7449.95 New Zealand dollars. And any other questions people have, feel free to chuck them in the comments. We'll try and get to them when we can. Otherwise, we'll be throwing some links to Andy, Jason, and Peter's work into the description. Especially, I know, Andy, you've done a huge amount of work on your video, so we'll make sure we get a link to that in there. Appreciate the all-nighter there. But gentlemen, a huge pleasure to have you all on board, and have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Peter and Jason. See you.